You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 17th of October 2024 on Monocle Radio. Hello and a warm welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Emma Nelson, and ahead in the next 30 minutes, China's Coast Guard encircles Taiwan as part of major military drills by Beijing. We'll examine the purpose of the drills and the message they're sending to the rest of the world. Also coming up.
План складається з 5 пунктів та 3 таємних додатків.
After presenting it to his parliament, Ukraine's president lays out his victory plan before the European Union. Will they go for it? We'll hear about Italy's latest plan to deal with migration, diverting boats to be processed in Albania. We'll have the business headlines, and it's Thursday, so it's Global Countdown Day, isn't it, Fernando, Augusto, Pacheco?
Yes, indeed, Emma, and today we'll explore the sounds of Kazakhstan.
Can't wait. That's all coming up right here on The Briefing with me, Emma Nelson. There has been intense military activity in the waters around Taiwan this week as China flexes its muscles and carries out major military exercises. The latest group to join is the Chinese Coast Guard, which has encircled Taiwan completely today. Well, to tell us more, I'm joined by Alessio Patolano, professor at King's College London and an expert on Asian defence. Welcome back. Good afternoon, Alessio.
Good afternoon, Emma. Always delighted to be back on the platform.
So just to explain to us, if you would, what the Chinese are doing exactly. We hear that there's up to more than, indeed, 150 aircraft and more than 35 vessels.
So three things, Emma, to say. First of all, the general context. This is the phase 2 or part B of an exercise that had a first phase in May. And this week had the second component. The timing of it is very important because the first part was when President Tsai of Taiwan was sworn in and gave the speech for the starting of the administration. This week, he gave another important speech about the 113 years of founding of the Republic of China. So there is a clear political statement set up there at the strategic level. That's the one thing. The second thing is when we compare this exercise with the previous exercise in May, there is a significant overlap, but there's also significant differences. And in particular, one of the differences is the extent to which this time you have the scale is slightly larger than the previous set of maneuvers. But this one, the peculiarity is that it involves military, paramilitary, and law enforcement assets, all involved in the conduct of the exercises. And that's when it comes to the third element, which is exactly the one that you mentioned, and that is the heavy involvement of the Chinese Coast Guard into part of the activities around Taiwan. What's interesting is that the command and control functions are all centered within the military chain of command. So this is the first time that we're seeing on a military exercise of this scale in the Strait of Taiwan. That really speaks to the reforms that have been conducted in China since 2018. The remarkable thing is that the Coast Guard has been rehearsing within the context of this exercise what would be an economic strangulation of the main entry points for shipping to get into Taiwan.
Tell us a little bit more about why China has decided to take this approach and to bring in the likes of the Coast Guard.
So this is not the first time that they bring in the Coast Guard, because if you remember from last year, the exercise that took place in March, you had already the Coast Guard, in particular the maritime authorities in Fujian, had implemented some sort of stop and search activity, or at least declared, of shipping that was going linking Matsu Island to main island in of Taiwan, which They announced it. They were conducting patrols, but didn't stop anybody in the end, which would have been like some sort of, in a context short of war, it would have been an equivalent to a quarantine, the likes of which we've seen, for example, at the time of the Cuban missile crisis back in the 1960s. This time what's different is that the conduct of the activity is part of broader military maneuvers, which would suggest it's not about quarantine, and therefore, if you want non-war type of activities, it's much more wartime blockade. Why now? That's to send a very clear message in terms of the political signaling to Taiwan. And it's about taking advantage of the fact that the Chinese knew that there would be these two moments in the year. In part, perhaps also not just to take the advantage of the opportunity and send and deliver a political message, a political signal, but also to, if you want, plant the seeds of normalizing a behavior that is increasingly more coercive. And obviously, by normalization, I mean setting the context for a type of behavior that next time would probably require even more forces deployed to the counter the civil activities for people to actually notice that there is a difference. Why that matters? Because normalizing that kind of behavior blurs the line between a rehearsal, an exercise, or the prelude to something else.
The strange thing that's come through this is there's not only the force of military might and the encircling of the Coast Guard, but this strange image that the world has seen in the last week, which is of a satellite image of Taiwan's main island and a line of arrows tracking around it in the shape of a heart. And there's this message saying, "Hi, my sweetheart, the patrol is in the shape of loving you." It is an incredibly strange thing.
Well, more than strange, this is part of that strategic communication piece. And, in a NATO context, we would call what we're looking at a highly sophisticated implementation of a hybrid strategy, one that brings together different levers of national power, including influence activities and strategic communication. And you're absolutely right. If you look at it from the external point of view, it seems a very odd thing to the contrast between the messages around what the Chinese Coast Guard Weibo profile put out, the shape of the hearts and the messaging around it. This is all about ensuring the love that the two sides of the straits have for each other, because we're all part of the same gig, as opposed to the sheer display of military might that you've had there. But again, this is about the psychological cognitive space of coercion that is mastered through the fact of we're doing this to give you some tough love. Almost as you were trying to discipline a child that has to be reminded of what proper manners are in a certain family context.
Alessio Patalano, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio. You're listening to The Briefing, where the time here in London is 8 minutes past midday. Let's have a look now at the rest of today's headlines. Here's Chris Chermack.
Thanks, Emma. US Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance has falsely stated former President Donald Trump did not lose the 2020 election at a rally in Pennsylvania. After dodging the question in the last few weeks, Vance insisted there were serious problems in 2020. Italy has criminalized seeking surrogacy abroad in a blow to LGBT families and those struggling to conceive. Surrogacy is already illegal in the country, but the government will now punish those looking for solutions overseas. And migration takes center stage at the EU summit, with Polish leaders warning the bloc needs to act against Russia and Belarus using migrants as weapons. Migration has been a hot issue on the continent, with Germany introducing border controls this year, breaking with EU free movement. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. And the EU's leaders will hear Kyiv's so-called victory plan today at a meeting in Brussels. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will lay out the 5 points his nation believes are necessary to bring about an end to Russia's invasion. Last week, he did a rapid round trip to the member states of Germany, France and Italy. How much difference will this have made for his plans? Well, Olga Rudenko is editor-in-chief of the Kyiv Independent and joins me now. Good afternoon, Olga.
Hi.
Just explain to us the nature of this plan. It seems to be something that Volodymyr Zelensky has been determined to talk about it to as many people as he can. There is a sense that this has a definitive element to it. What are the chances of its success and its acceptance?
That's a great question. And I think we should start by admitting that the victory plan, the name itself can be a little bit deceptive because it's less of an exact action plan that would lead to victory. It's more of a public advocacy campaign. And the primary audience for the campaign, obviously, is not in Ukraine. It's the Western leaders and Western nations. And we can say that it's a last-ditch effort by President Zelensky to round up the support and to prove the aid for Ukraine in the face of the US elections and the potential outcome of that.
The fact that you mentioned it as a last-ditched attempt suggests that if this fails, there will not be the opportunity for anything of its scale to be repeated. Is that correct?
In the sense of a public advocacy campaign like that, I think it is a one-time thing that he is trying to pull off. And the moment in the war right now is, of course, very precarious. And he's been explaining this quite clearly that we need way more weapons and way more air defense, especially with the winter coming. So it's a combination of the time. It's about the timing, but it's a combination of the timing in the sense of the election is coming, but also the timing in the sense of this is what's happening in the war now, and this is a decisive moment. It's either helping Ukraine win or letting it lose.
Explain to us a little bit about how much last week's tour of Germany, France and Italy and the UK did in terms of laying fertile ground for any plans that Zelensky lays out today. I mean, how helpful was his trip last week?
So this still remains to see. I think it launched some processes that the fruits of that we will see in the coming days and weeks. The tour is not exactly over, of course, because today Zelensky is in Brussels and he is presenting the plan to the European Council. Yesterday, he did the only presentation in Ukraine so far. He presented the victory plan to the Ukrainian parliament. Still not to the Ukrainian public in detail, but we know some things that they published. It's hard to say how effective it was. It was something that needed to be done, obviously, especially with the Ramstein meeting being cancelled last minute. And it's something that he had to do. And the thing is that the ball now is completely in the corner of our Western allies. And Zelensky repeated it very clearly in the parliament, in the Ukrainian parliament yesterday. He said, now it all depends on our Western partners.
The bloc must now act as one, given, as you mentioned, the US election such an uncertainty.
Yes, the US election is of course, something that is hanging over us, and it's a huge uncertainty, and it's a very difficult thing for, including for Zelensky to manage. And of course, we expect our European partners to step in and to, there was this thing that we were discussing this morning at our news meeting, how Zelensky is trying to make the war kind of Trump-proofed, and that has not been achieved yet.
Olga Rudenko, Editor-in-Chief of the Kyiv Independent, thank you so much for joining us on the line. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. One of the subjects threatening to pull attention away from the Ukrainian appeal for more help is the EU's perpetual headache of illegal migration. Earlier this week, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk guaranteed his country would assume centre stage at this week's meeting by temporarily removing the right to asylum in the country. And Italy, this week, for the first time, has diverted a shipload of migrants to be processed in Albania. The Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says it's the most practical and pragmatic approach to the problem. Well, Guy Delorney is Monocle's Balkans correspondent. Good afternoon, Guy.
Afternoon, Emma, and afternoon all.
So how is this arrangement going?
Practical and pragmatic. Those are interesting choices of words, aren't they? Because is it really pragmatic or practical to be using an Italian Navy ship to transport 16, that's 16 people from Lampedusa to the Albanian port of Shenzhen? Because that's what's happened yesterday. The in Albania with these 16 people who want to seek asylum in Italy on board. And they've already had to send 4 of them to Italy because they don't meet the criteria which Italy had guaranteed they would all meet, which was to say that they were adults, single males, and not vulnerable. 2 of them weren't adults. I don't know about the other 2 yet. We haven't had that confirmed, but the UNHCR did some checks. They found these people didn't meet the criteria, so they've already gone from Albania. So a quarter of those 16 have gone, and there are an awful lot of people, Emma, in Italy scratching their heads thinking, is this anything more than a performative load of nonsense designed to appeal to a far-right support base?
Well, the same questions were raised last year when the British government decided to send illegal migrants to Rwanda for processing, and people were questioning the reasoning behind it because it didn't seem wildly practical. Are those same questions being asked of the Italians?
Absolutely they are, and with teeth, because in Italy's case, they've spent more than 600 million euros on establishing this project with Albania. They've built 2 centres in Albania, one in Shenzhen, the port, the other one in Gjarad, about 20 kilometres down the road. So these are processing and accommodation facilities. They're staffed by Italian officials, Italian border police in essence, who of course have got to be housed and fed and given compensation for spending time away from their families. They've got to be sent to and from Italy. It's all terribly expensive stuff, and it's supposed to send a message that it isn't going to be that easy to apply for asylum in Italy. But in actual fact, it's still meant to be an asylum process, and an asylum process runs independent of whatever one's views are on people leaving one country and arriving in another. If they apply for asylum, that's something which is regulated by international treaty, international conventions to which Italy is a signatory, and it can't duck out of those obligations. So a lot of this is terribly performative. I don't think that any of it's fooling anybody, and it's also coming at a time when the kind of irregular migration that Italy is talking about is down by about 60% year on year.
For the Albanians, however, what benefits does it bring them?
Well, it allows them to show esprit de corps, that's for sure. And it's also allowing them to show they've got, we hear about the special relationship between Britain and the United States all the time and roll our eyeballs around about that. But Albania and Italy, there's long-standing special relationship there, which has stretched from Italy colonising Albania through to Albania sending an awful lot of its young people to work in Italy. And when people in the area of these asylum processing centres in Albania have been asked about how they feel about this, they've said, well, it's good because, our children are working in Italy. This is a chance for us to do something. Prime Minister Edi Rama has said this is a gesture of gratitude from us to Italy. But I think more than that, at a time when Albania is looking at getting its EU accession talks into full swing, it's allowing Albania to present themselves as being part of the solution rather than part of the problem, as a lot of people in Britain look at Albania and Albanians.
And this, therefore, allows Albania to, as you say, look as if it's stepping up to a wider EU issue, just at the point when it wants to join the party. How far along is that application?
Well, funnily enough, by an incredible coincidence, Emma, on Tuesday, Albania opened the first of its negotiation chapters in what will undoubtedly be an extremely protracted accession process. But it's formally started now. That process is underway. These chapters which it has to clear, which will trigger reforms in Albania, which will bring it up to speed with European standards, open the door to European Union funding, and give people in Albania hope that there's going to be a good future for their country, which means they don't have to send their children off to work in Italy or elsewhere in Europe. That's all underway now. And so that's good news for Albania. It's less good news for North Macedonia, which until this point had its European Union accession fate coupled to that of Albania. It's been decoupled because of an extremely silly and interminable bilateral dispute with Bulgaria, which in essence thinks that the North Macedonian authorities aren't acknowledging the Bulgarian heritage of the country and its people.
Guy Delorney, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio. You're listening to The Briefing. A look now at the trade and economy news. Vicky Price is the economist and former joint head of the UK government's economic service. Good afternoon. Welcome back, Vicky.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
The headlines here in the United Kingdom are the crystal ball gazing of what might be in the UK budget. It's not for a little while, but everybody seems to know the contents already.
You're absolutely right. I think what is happening, of course, is that the government is trying various things out to see what the response will be. And we've already had, of course, some of the businesses sort of saying that the tax increases, which are perhaps in the offing, are going to be a real problem for them. So new little things appear on a daily basis. But you're quite right. The budget is not until the 30th. But speculation has been incredibly rife. And the worry is that the figures which the Chancellor is saying they need to raise money for to fill that gap which they have found since the election back in the summer, it seems to have doubled from about 22 billion, we thought originally, to needing to raise taxes by 40 billion and or cut spending to meet the requirements of particularly making sure that services improve in the future.
How has that number jumped so much and why?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, the first thing, of course, that has happened is that they have inherited this national insurance contribution cut from the Conservatives. There had been a 2% cut twice in the space of about 6 months, which meant 10 billion each time. So that's 20 billion, which is something that has to go on for, every year because you're collecting that much less. And then, of course, we've had the acceptance of the pay review body's recommendations for increasing wages in the public sector, which have added an extra 10 billion. So that needs to also be added to this. And then you've got the new requirement now, which we think is going to be part of the new fiscal rules, which are going to be announced on the 30th, which is that you can only spend on public services, on the civil service and also the National Health Service and education and everything else, what you receive in terms of tax revenues. And if that is the case, then that's a real constraint. If you can no longer use the capital budget that was there was always some money allocated for projects. A number of them, of course, have been scaled back. You can switch that across and then you're fine. Well, you can't do that anymore. At least the expectation is that you won't be able to do that. And that, of course, brings with it the requirement to either cut back or raise taxes even more, and hence how you get to that 40 billion figure.
Before we get to the issue of, we even get to the budget, obviously we know an awful lot about what might be in it, but how is the United Kingdom being seen from abroad at the moment in terms of the financial direction that it is going? Because it has been a place of downright chaos for about 4 or 5 years.
Yes.
And one wonders whether actually having a new Labour government, regardless of the difficulties that they are facing, and some people are saying they're going backing track on promises, is there a sense that the UK is in a safer pair of hands at the moment?
Yes, there is. I mean, there is more stability. I mean, we are assuming that given that Labour has such a big majority, they're going to be able to pass various things through without any problem over the next few years, even if, perhaps there is a bit of a more vocal opposition to some of the things that they're doing, but actually they have a very clear majority and they can do what they like, more or less. So this stability is good news. And we've also seen that there was quite a successful investment summit that took place just earlier this week, and that's been good news because there have been loads of pledges of investment in the UK. But what we have seen more recently is a bit of a concern about what the fiscal situation might be. So yields have gone up a little bit. So basically capital markets are slightly more worried about the amount that perhaps may need to be borrowed by this government. So there is a little bit of a concern there that things may not go as smoothly as perhaps the government had hoped. But of course, if you keep saying that you need to raise more money and there is a big black hole, then obviously markets will be concerned. So what they may be saved by is the fact that inflation at least is coming down and interest rates will have to be cut probably more aggressively than the Monetary Policy Committee at present was anticipating, because of course inflation is now below target, as it is in fact in Europe too. So the trend is downwards. So that might help businesses a little bit and also might help the cost of government borrowing if indeed it is then reflected on yields that they have to pay. Let's
talk about European inflation as well. It's falling very, very sharply, almost at a surprising rate, isn't it?
Yes, and it's really interesting because it's more or less the same. It's 1.7% for the Eurozone for September as it is in the UK. So for once, I think the sort of gap that seemed to exist for some time between the UK and the Eurozone at any rate seems to have disappeared from that point of view. But the interesting thing is what has been happening on a monthly basis. If you look across a number of sort of big countries, what you find is that in September, they have seen falls in prices, cuts by supermarkets and others, service costs coming down. So you've had reductions in the month in places like Denmark, but also in Germany. You've had it happen also in Spain. You've had it happen in France, in fact, quite significantly by 1.3% in the month. What this suggests is that, there is a danger of deflation coming through, particularly when you look at what's been going on in terms of growth or no growth in Germany, which, of course, is so important for the rest of the Eurozone and Europe as a whole. So the expectation, therefore, is that next week we're having the European Central Bank having a meeting on interest rates, and they will probably cut and then cut again. Because remember, there had been a period after the Eurozone crisis back in the 2010s when there was deflation in Europe, and they found it very, very difficult to get out of it. And Draghi had to intervene by cutting interest rates to negative, which is, of course, where they stayed until July 2022.
Vicky Price, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. 12:26 here in London. Fernando Augusto Pacheco has just burst into the studio, whacked his big book down, opened it, and if anybody ever meets Fernando, just ask him to show you his notebook. His writing is quite phenomenal. No one can see it.
Every day there's a different pen color as well.
Really?
Yeah, today's kind of red, very simple today.
Why?
Because I have a collection of 24 pens from Pilot, and they have 24 colors. So I think,
what prompts the choice of colour each day?
To be honest, I pick very randomly. So today's a red day.
Today is a red day.
Or an orange day. You're wearing a fabulous orange.
I'm an orange, and we're all russet autumnal, or I don't know, fizzy pop. Right, that's distracted us momentarily from the business in hand, which is the global countdown. Always a joy to see you in the studio on a Thursday. Where are you taking us today?
Well, I'm taking us today to Kazakhstan. And you know what, Emma, there's a reason for that. I'm very into Central Asian sounds at the moment. Okay. We've done Uzbekistan just a few weeks ago. It's fascinating. There's so much new music there in the region that I need to buy a ticket.
What's a Central Asian? We're going to hear it in a minute. And I'm going to listen for the first time for you. So wherever you are and you're listening, I'm with you listening to what Fernando has chosen for us. It's always a joy and always a surprise. But if you could, without actually playing the music, describe that sound, what would it be? You know what? It does sound a lot like 80s electro meets kind of a little bit of a folkloric touch. Especially amazing. 80s electro meets folklore, okay? That's the description I would give you. Okay, rolling up our sleeves, rubbing our hands together with glee. Let's dive in at number 5. Number 5, I would say, is the indie track of the top 5. Her name is Marhaba Sabi. The song is Kiz Bozbala. It's a very nice ballad. Let's have a listen, then I'll tell you a little bit more about her. Oh yes, we're feeling that. We're feeling it. And she was discovered on the Kazakh Voice, which is, of course, their own version of their music talent show. But there's an interesting thing about her biographies. Sometimes it's hard to get information about those artists. But it was written that her music is a philosophical view on everything happening in life. Isn't everything? Isn't absolutely right? Everything, frankly. Are we going to be introducing that on the playlist? What was it again? A philosophical what? A philosophical view on everything that is happening in life. So it's about everything, basically. Good. Do we know what she's singing about? It's all about love. She's very gentle and chic, because she was performing this track at Kazakh Fashion Week for one of the designers. So she was there at the catwalk while the models were walking around her. So there's a fashion component to it as well. She is, and she's a big fan of the 1980s flat black felt hat that's placed practically at a sort of practically glued vertically to the back of your head. It's it's a thing.
It's fashion, darling.
It's fashion. Right, okay. That was Mahabasabi. She's delicious and divine and lovely. So the little notes I've got next to me, because I've had a look at the videos. If you do listen to this, I plead with you. Go and look at the videos as well, because it makes it twice as fun. I've just got choreo, clapping for this one.
Lots of clapping.
Love choreo.
It's less fashion, but more catchy, I would say. Okay. He is big in Kazakhstan. He's Sadradin, and this song is a delight. Starts very mellow, but then it keeps on growing. The beats keeps on pumping. Jawab Barma. Let's have a listen.
Oh, that's a family event song, isn't it?
I would be happy if I was born in Kazakhstan. Listening to this from a young age, I would love that.
Absolutely.
I love that. And you know, I was describing the music of Kazakhstan. Feel that. There's some pop and electronic elements, but very folkloric. The clapping, we were clapping in studio.
There's scope in this world for a bit more clapping. And there's scope in this world for a bit more everybody getting together in a room and jigging about. There's a bit of choreography here. But the world of dancing has become such a singular and lonely business. Even if you're on a dance floor, ladies and gentlemen, have a clap.
And enjoy life.
Yes.
Like Sadradin.
What's he singing about?
He's not robotic at all. Well, you asked me that. There's only one line I actually translated. He says, I wrote your name in my heart.
Oh,
it's all about
they're a sweet little bunch out in Kazakhstan, aren't they? We've got Mahabasabi, who's doing her philosophical view on life. It's great. We've got Sadruddin with his choreography and his clapping and his, what was his name? All about love?
It's all about love, writing the name in the heart. I don't know, how can you do that?
It's just, I don't know. Hopefully not physically. That might be a bit unpleasant. Right, my next one. They like a jacket, do this band, don't they?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
I mean, and she is fabulous. She's actually from Uzbekistan. She's a diva. This song by itself has 300 million views already. I'll tell you more about it, but she's absolutely fabulous. It's Ozoda from Uzbekistan with Kok Juguli. Let's have a listen. Emma, honestly, I have to translate it to you.
Please.
It's Blue Jay.
Don't. It's what?
Blue Jay. I think Jay is a bird.
Right.
I think.
But we know it as, what's the name again?
Kok Jiguli.
Kok Jiguli. Right.
What a track. She is fabulous. She's fabulous. She's 50 years old. She's like that diva from Uzbekistan. And I have to tell you something about Uzbekistan. That's the music mecca in the region. I've done it a few weeks ago. I'm fascinated by the country. And apparently in the 80s, they used to have a great music scene as well. So Ozoda, she is the queen.
Will you promise me you'll put that on the playlist? Just as a bit of a wild card. Because whatever you're doing, it's another of those stopping you on your tracks, apart from the fact that it's not necessarily for all the right reasons. Put it this way, she raises a smile, or those lyrics certainly raise a smile.
Absolutely.
If you've got the mentality of a 10-year-old. Okay, thank you for that.
And she's incredibly popular as well.
She is, and she's just about to get even more so. Right, that was Ozoda and the unmentionable name. Number 2.
Let's listen to some Kazakh rap.
This is baths now in the videos and lots of men with no clothes on.
Yes.
But it's quite sort of rural and macho.
And jokey as well.
Jokey, rural, macho baths.
You have a very handsome man on a horse and he's, half naked.
Yes.
And he's pretending he's selling the advertising for a shampoo or a soap bar. I couldn't quite understand. But they're having fun. I think this is a kind of a fun rap group. Let's have a listen to Irina Karaturna with Fear.
Чудо света это море по колено это
vibes of a kind of like Kazakh Macklemore.
Yes. It's a good song to listen when you're riding a horse or something.
Yes.
You know, it's...
Do you know, I often wonder what to do when I'm riding a horse, and I think you might just have solved my problems.
But don't worry, Emma, they're having fun. This is a jokey group. They've become big on social media, and now it's a mixture of comedy and music, really.
It's brilliant. For all the wrong reasons. I'm absolutely charmed by Kazakhstan because we have love and we have tenderness and we have carving names on people's hearts, which is just a little gruesome. Then we have a really rude named song, and then we have macho men on horses and in baths. What more could what more could anybody ask from a nation's musical offerings apart from number one?
Which is a return of Sadruddin, but that's his newer song.
Now, he was a choreography and clapping guy.
Yes.
Okay.
This is less clapping, a little bit more melodrama.
So there I am. Cheeky. We love a bit of cheeky. It just reminds me of eating somewhere that's really harshly lit with plastic tables about 11 o'clock at night, something wrapped in something flatbread and delicious. You're not entirely sure where you are, but the music is cheeky. What's that about then, apart from Emma's late night snacks?
Again, he says, I love you like Adam, even if you ate the apple from paradise. I believe he was talking about Adam and Eve, right?
Okay. I love you like Adam, even if you eat the apple.
From paradise, because
right.
Eve eats the apple in paradise, right? I have to catch up with my Bible lessons,
yes.
but something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and Google Translate has so much to answer for.
I love your face.
I'm just baffled by that, because I thought it was going to be, well, not that, frankly. What's your favourite today? I mean, you've got that one shot at pushing the Kazakh culture into the playlist. What will we be introducing on the Monocle playlist soon enough?
I am going to say that Marhaba, the song at number 5, Kizbos Bala, it's a cool song. I think it definitely fits the playlist.
Okay. Fernando, Augusto, Pacheco, thank you as ever for the global playlist. And that's all the time we have for today's edition of The Briefing. Many thanks to all my guests and to the producer Anita Riotta. Our researchers were Sana Jumani and Gunnar Grunled, and our studio manager was Flynn Simons. The Briefing is back at the same time tomorrow, but for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.